You can't hide underneath the snow either. They're coming after you. Whether you know that or not, whether you want to believe it, whether you want to believe the guy behind the woodshed, whether you want to believe that you have something to do, whether you believe that Constitution was there, you can wrap yourself up around it with the flag around that, and that did it all. And you didn't understand what I told you what I've been telling you all along that was confirmed in that court case back in February, Supreme Court, that the Civil War fundamentally changed the place they called the United States of America. Sort of what I've been talking about all this time. I figured all that out a long time ago. What's been harder is to figure out how to get people to understand what that was without all the psyop that goes on around it, and to start looking a lot clearer at what's going on and start determining a better path through the problem. And stop being the whiners that we turned out to be, that we really aren't living up to our forebears. I say forefathers, our forebears. It's a very slow slide into the stinking abyss. And so if you don't, being crickets, being so quiet in the nation that was requiring that you step up to protect yourself and that would indirectly protect others. Again, that equity answer that's required in any action to protect yourself and your rights, to vindicate your rights against a trespass, and those similarly situated. You're always speaking to the higher cause. And so if you don't quite get into that, then you're not going to, maybe you will never understand what I've been talking about. But hey, before I go too far and forget, this is a BTW RLM 319. For those of you on past broadcast, got to prod you a little bit. Recast, wherever you find this broadcast in the past, you listen to that number, type it in if you want to. You don't have a link to this where we started, where I got the information. You'll have a blogcaster entry that should pop up somehow and get you tracking in on where I got this information, and you can track further to give yourself an idea on how to look at this. In other words, as I say all the time, I'm looking at what we call the news. I don't care what media you have it. It's all just a bunch of nonsense in my mind, because you can look really sometimes at the titles. You can see within the context of a few passages what the truth is, but people look past it. And I say look for that truth, and then you figure out what needs to be done. It gives you a direction. You're not. Well, lots of people want to say, well, what ought to be. Folks, it's what it is. What it is. And if you don't deal with things of what it is, you're likely not going to. You're just going to continue to complain, and pretty soon the shackles are tighter and tighter, and you'll end up making excuses on how that you've tried and it doesn't affect you that much, and you'll just slowly and compliantly go into your servitude. Oh, I don't pay this, and I don't pay that much, and I don't do this, so I only pay that much. I only get they only come at me once a year. And you didn't realize if you looked around and you actually took responsibility, none of these people that they call themselves authority, which kind of euphemistically say authorita, it's the costume of authority, not actual authority. And then we have the other pertinent or relevant thing that you need to figure out right before that is, or is it a subject matter that's within a jurisdiction that these people have to say? If you're not thinking that way, and you don't identify the criminal that you're facing when they come after you, or come at you, you're missing the whole thing. It's not what it ought to be. It's what's in your face, or what can be in your face. So I come here a decade now and trying to explain all that to you, and getting these thoughts reoriented, so when you get confronted, you have a better word in your mouth than probably 99.99% of the people. And for those of you that take that one little that little bit of 0.99999 people, the 0.00001 that would actually take the next step and actually do things, you found that that's absolutely the fact. Absolutely puts you in a different condition. Doesn't mean that the criminal goes away. Like, no different than if you heard of a bank robber coming out, he would just drop his gun and his bag of money that he just stole. He's not going to do that. And so, as I say on the broadcast and the Twitter, bad don't fix itself. We were supposed to not let it go bad, and when it went bad, we were supposed to arrest it. And we've lost all these concepts in ourselves, and we don't even know about that. So I come every week, try to tell you, I don't care what the subject matter is, I just throw the things into my tabs just to give me something to talk about, without any other direction. Again, if you want to put a thumbs down on the broadcast, totally fine. I agree. You don't have an agreement with me, that's fine. I know who you are, though, but that's okay. You can put that there. But I want to know I want to know what you think. I want to know what the point is, what the problem really is. And I would just have to tell you, you better bring your A game. I want to talk about substantial things, not nonsense. And a lot of things I see are nonsense when you get down to having to do something. Yeah, we can talk about philosophy all the time. But when you have to actually go shoot the gun in the war, it's a little different, I think. I think a lot. And I think anybody who's been there knows that. So we try to do that. I try to keep you out of the war, that even though we're in the war, we're trying to go through you're like a counter movement inside this movement. That's a real anarchist. People make up this stuff so they don't have to do much but complain and talk. But a real anarchist actually acts against the system. Doesn't just talk about it. Oh, there's some talking, but it's not. In fact, the talking could actually be a diversion. In other words, you're making the talk a camouflage, aren't you? This is no joke about this war that we're up against. And again, you make certain decisions on how you approach it. It came up again in the mining district meeting this last week, and we were talking about the last work that was done to send a judicial notice to the highest court in the land, so-called, to show them what they completely screwed up. And I told you I did what I told you I was going to do relative to that Timms case, and explaining how their decision, the rationale in that decision, was denied to the miners when they denied a remedy to the miner in equity. And so there's high-level stuff here that we can talk about, but I don't get to that because we're all still fighting amongst each other on whether or not we want to agree with what the guy behind the woodshed is saying, or whether or not that puts me in a position, or if I'm confused, or I am confused, I want to learn more, and I'm trying to tell you after all these years of doing this stuff, just jump in somewhere that you just can't cotton it anymore. You can't handle the problem. Dig in there. You need that. You're going to need that anyway, because you need to have something. You're going to have to put some skin in that game in order to, when they come attack that, even in all their divisive, if it's not a direct attack but a passive one, you're going to have enough in that, enough investment in that you're going to hang in there. Because it's easy for us to walk away from our little fight. But we're entangled in quite a big deal, and I want to something came up this morning. I think I got this from Bob Renner over at the Effin site. No, I didn't try to cuss. It's the Freedoms Network, social network. Still hanging in there, folks. There's a link to a link to a link. So my problem here today, I just want to get this out for those of you that are listening to me, that are interested in the mining law, and especially the guys at Jefferson Mining District. Listen up here. If you can help me out for I won't be able to get to this for at least 2 days now. Something came through in a source, and this is my problem. The source, I don't know if I necessarily trust it, but it's okay. I mean, it's like this neutral source. But we want to know about this. If you remember how we've got 3 demands before the president relative to the injunction that he has not answered, it came through this news, and I'm really not interested in what the report is through unsubstantiated sources, and I would ask someone to substantiate this to me, and if you will, give me a couple links on how you substantiated for me. It would take up some. It won't take. So I won't have to. I can do this quicker. I guess the point is, if you can do this, send me a link at markonthebeast@protonmail.com with the proof of whether or not this story is actually true. Not because of the immigration, but because the president. They're saying here that President Trump is about to. Well, here they start. I'm all messed up. I didn't plan on talking about this, but they're talking just like that Sorcha Fa'al author, and they always cite sources within the government, like sources within the Kremlin said. This story starts the same way. I don't like that. That's why I gotta have someone, if you can help me. Although I'm gonna have to do this eventually, but I won't be able to get to it till about Tuesday, I think. The sources within the administration are saying that President Trump is going to invoke the Insurrection Act. Now, he's going to do it for the purpose of immigration. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the fact that we have a letter. Those of you that are in Jefferson Mine District know this. We have a letter of demand on the literal constitutional crisis that can only be solved by the president. He could use this act. If he's willing to pull this trigger, I want to find out if this is legitimate, because we may have a quick little thing to do here in helping this along, if you will. Remember, for those of you listening, and I'm talking to my guys here in the district right now. You know, I had a thought maybe to make this broadcast maybe mainly for mining law, but I realized it was a bigger story, a bigger deal in the world, so I decided not to go just specific to that idea, because who would listen really? And unless you're interested in the law of the land and want to do something, because that's what we're trying to do. We're doing something. But I want to get back to this thing. This is an Insurrection Act that they talk about in 1807. This is right up our alley. If he's going to do it, if he's actually thinking about this, it's actually on his table right now, despite the fact he hasn't talked to us, despite the fact that he hasn't, by his not talking to us, he has told us that he doesn't intend to make America great again. And now we talk in this story through natural news, and this is the problem. I want to go past natural news where they got their info. I want to go back and see, is this reality or is this just a story that according to multiple senior administration officials, the president intends to invoke the tremendous powers of the act to remove illegal immigrants from the country. Well, we have an insurrection that Congress was supposed to agree to that destroyed a Republican form of government. It's right in the Constitution that the executive branch of the government is authorized when they see it to actually in their inherent power to execute against that our injunction in 2013 speaks to that he knows about. Now, I want to know if those of you can help find out if this is legitimate, not just a story going through the natural news to invoke a bunch of Q and nonsense and all this other stuff, because he ties in a lot of this political rhetoric, sanctuary cities, journo terrorists, and all this other stuff. That could be true too. Again, I got to qualify all this. If he's willing to go here, he's willing to execute on what we have done in that 2013 notice to him, case to the notice to him. So this is so important. I wanted to get this out for anybody who's listening, and I wanted y'all to hear it because this is how we start working, how I start working on just scraps of information that may give us an insight on avenues of addressing very important issues in ways that have never been done before. Not that because they've never been done, but because they have to be never been done, and they ought to be done. And part of the problem is until you get somebody in a seated decision who's going in the right direction, you're going to have to either get their attention and change their motivation. And if you can't, then you can't get them to move in the right direction to make a right decision. If this guy is already moving in this direction, this is one of the things he would use to fix the insurrection within the states, where the thing that we enjoined in 2013 has destroyed the Republican form of representative government that we're told is guaranteed by Congress. He's the executive arm of that. And so if you understand, those of you that have been listening to me and or those of you guys in the district, this is a big deal right here all of a sudden came forward. Not as we're being told. We got to look behind this scene. If this is happening, we may have another communication that needs to go out, and I need to know that, and I would like to speed up the time. I don't want to wait till Tuesday or Wednesday before I can figure out the heads up of this and then whether or not we need to help augment what we've already got before the guy. Again, my mind is, just to y'all now, we're all clear. I'm pretty clear that there's no making America great again. I'm pretty clear, and you hear me talk about it and how, not my opinion, just how things work out. When they agreed to pass that public lands bill, they destroyed another part of America. They took out the primary economy of the United States of America, the people of the United States of America. There's a war against you. This guy, Trump, is instrumental in allowing that. He didn't even make a fuss or a muss about that. This is exactly what we're talking about. He's either going to be pushing, this is either a story and it ain't happening, it's just to get everybody excited, or else we still have a problem, again, in the dynamics of the administration. And if there's going to be some sort of a confusion, I want to be able to be right there to try and gain any kind of advantage in the condition that I can. Right? If I find a weakness in the enemy, and until I find they're my friend, I'm going to exploit whatever I can. Now, this is totally outside of any law that you might read, totally outside of anything you might hear. It's strictly how I've found out how you have to deal with these people. You got to get their attention however you get their attention. And I don't mean you put yourself in jeopardy or anybody else. For those of you that want to get all grandiose about how this actually works, you're wrong. It's really subtle. The incrementalness is so subtle, you have to treat it with kid gloves, and you have to move as subtly or less, even more subtly than it is. And so getting back over, now I'll get back onto my tabs. Very important, if he's going to move on this, it's going to sound bad because it sounds like martial law and all, but remember, be careful on how you interpret this. We're already under civil war. The organization you thought was the foundation and organic establishment changed at the Civil War, and that was never ended. Where everybody says we're in a police state, they're wrong. We're in a military state. Your states are administrative military districts. It says all this in the CIA and the laws. You can just read for this, folks. I say this, and I think people think in their mind it can't be, or they don't even understand how to attach it. This is a reality. In fact, I just got a confirmation through an email, and I know this is it's gonna trigger a bunch of people who heard about this before, and whatever all it does for you. There's some fundamental law about the gold fringe flag. I just got an email from someone that communicated with with one of the National Guard units in a state, and the conversation showed that by logic and by rule that you're looking at a military jurisdiction. That's not unknown for some people that stir, but they make too big a deal about that. Once you realize that, you shouldn't make a big deal. What you have to know is just take notice that that's the jurisdiction, and I say once you see the jurisdiction you're in, respond to it the proper way to avoid it. Don't engage it and challenge it. Just start doing the things that is inside your rights to avoid it. It's a whole different thought process that goes on to do this. And you start baffling these people when you start. I've done it enough to know that that's what happens. So this invoking the Insurrection Act is going to sound and look like military rule, but it's already military rule. Here's the point. The thing that's incrementally invaded your nation and your states is an insurrection that needs to be quelled. And the only touchstone I have is this law of the land, the literal land, to show that if that's that primary economy, that primary wealth driver in your country, in your states, in your counties has been interfered with, you are a slave people. And you're going to be slave to the imposition. And so you're kind of looking at a choice. You already submitted to the fact of the war against you that you lost. Now are you going to try and force that occupier, which is now the superior force, to come in and make your peace again with the states when they were invaded and the insurrection caused there to steal away your life, which is bringing on this next global transformation they're telling you. And why all you're watching your states go into, well, I don't even know what you're going into. It's really nonsense. It's a bunch of lunatics and religious adherents that are now running your state. You want to be separation of church and state. You should have kept Gaia out of your legislatures, and you should have kept the global governance fear mongering out of your country. And you should attack the Udall Foundation for the hub of the organizer of how the method that they use is extended throughout, metastasizing throughout the country. As I said last week, and point out all this, folks. Just tell me what's going on, and I'll tell you. Probably I don't know everybody and everything, but there's a few core people that are involved, or not people, but groups. And I always get people, I know the bigger picture, and they tell me this little bitty thing that's not incidental to the bigger picture. They think it's such a big deal. You got to control this over here. Well, no, okay, that's one of the points. But let me explain this other condition over here that we've been looking at. And all of a sudden the conversation stops. There's a big deal going on here. And it all depends on who you are and where you're going to fall in. And if you don't, you're just going to be taken down incrementally. Your life you're going to be dealt with and moved into austerity and the prosperity, the shared prosperity, the shared obligation and duty. Your rights are going to be humanistic rights, and those are privileges and obligations. Those are duties and privileges. Those are not rights. They talk about them as rights, but they're obligations. They're like obligations and duties, but without any authority behind them. They're really more duties and obligations. This is the future that they want. This is the future they're getting. Why? Because you're crickets. Anyway, so getting over to this is a new thing. I didn't think about to talk about it. I haven't researched it. If they're going to invoke the Insurrection Act and they're going to fix the actual insurrection, or if this guy Trump is in the direction to think about that based in immigration, we can take a bit of that and we can say, okay, while you're here, while you're doing that, why don't you go fix these problems? It's not our opinion, and it's not just an idea, and it's not some patriot answer, that we're going to fix everything. What it's going to do is it's going to correct an invasion that happened that nobody noticed. And every one of your states happened. Every one of you is affected, whether you understand it or not, whether you want to excuse it away or not, or whether you want to agree to it but then not think about it more. This is a complete rout in this country. And so let me just leave it there. Anybody that can help find that out, I'd appreciate it. It would save me about 3 days to start looking at it and whether or not, even if we can engage it. But let me go back now to where I was going to start. This is an older story, but it came back up this week because it's an ongoing saga of destruction, and you almost find willful destruction through one of the utilities in your life, the energy sector. And this is another thing when you start looking at what they're attacking. They're going to attack these modern societies need energy. That's one of the control points. It's not that there's a utility system that's the problem. It's who's going to control that and how they control it, and the fact of the administration around how they control that. So your utility commissions, all that. I've told you how your smart meters are coming through, how you're in the states that you have to go there. And I told you one of the main things you're going to focus on in your states will be that you'll have this alternative dispute resolution that can be done, but that it's got a savings clause that must be regarded, or shall, excuse me, this is imperative, not a must, it's a shall. It shall be regarded before alternative dispute resolution is used. And alternative dispute resolution is the method we sued as a destruction of your way of life. And that's what people would call most closely aligned to that Hegelian process that everyone's got so popularized that no one understood what that was actually in play in their life. They always look at these like this is the problem with AJ. Throw you looking at here. Look at this big deal right here. Look at the Gulf. Look at that. Look at this psyop. They talk about the Hegelian dialecto. You didn't realize that all those days and all these years that have been going on, your city, counties, and all your local jurisdictions, your state jurisdictions, the federal jurisdiction have been doing that right underneath your nose on wholly less sensational topics. And so they desensitize you to be able to just become a parrot for the Hegelian dialectic. You go ahead and pass it off like you think you know what it's doing. You don't realize that by the time you got it all figured out, another half of your rights have been stolen somehow. Another cost, demands upon your life and your livelihood have been stolen right now. And what did I tell you that the Timms case that we read, I took so much time to read, it says right in there from the Supreme Court, even this is if you look at the occupier even says this, and this is why this becomes so important for me, it says you cannot be affected punitively in your livelihood. Now, why are you all, if that's the case, why are you all allowing it? Why are we sitting back and allowing this so-called, you can put it in any name, Agenda 21, you can put it in all these, the carbon deal, the climate change, the sustainable cities, the modernization acts. I told you all about these years and years ago coming to the federal side. Your federal government's coming down with the militaristic side of this, and you haven't stepped up and said, well, wait a minute now, we had to wait till Tim's, but here it said, you cannot be affected in your livelihood at all on a punitive measure. And all this stuff is punitive, because why? Why is that, folks? Why would this be punitive coming out the gate? I don't know. I haven't said it because I'm hoping people put this together, what I've been saying. I want people to, you got to engage your brain. You really have to engage that brain in the proper way. It's punitive. Why? Because I've also explained to you, and when I showed a couple of people early on, the people that you may have heard elsewhere now really getting a lot of following. When I pointed out, first of all, that civil rights statute, said look at what your civil rights really is, and look at where the authority is, and look at what the authority is, and I mean that in actual authority, the power to hurt you. And then I said, now go over here in this section, I think it was in Title 7, wasn't it? Those of you that can follow what I was saying and kind of know where I'm going. That man, not human, see, humanists have their animal rights, man has a different status, is not included because you're working through agency and legalisms with government. But man and mankind in Title, I think it's 7, and reflected in 21, says that man is a pest animal. Remember that? And so whatever you do is an irreparable harm to the religion of Gaia, green religion, whatever you want to call it, or those that think that, well, we're just dirty monkeys, and that somehow they're a little bit higher. You understand that. They think they're a little bit better than you, and they can dictate to you. So man is considered, or mankind, including women, don't get triggered, is considered a pest animal. If you go read carefully in the code, the United States Code. And now that gets me over to Title 50, where you live in a military occupation. It says so, and it says all the exceptions in there to the government. Don't poison people. Don't poison humans. Don't biologically radiate. Don't do all this stuff, except if you're the government and have its license. And so you start putting all this together, and your mind has to go through kind of It does its own flips and flops as you start to reorient to a reality. If you're considered a pest animal, and we're in the pesticide section, they can do about anything they want to get rid of the pest animal, can't they? And when they come out and they say that the pest animal's creating too much carbon load and it's killing our earth just because they said so, they can do anything they need to get control you, can't they? As long as you stay crickets to that and allow someone to treat you as a pest animal instead of the man or a woman that you are, having the responsibility. Understand this is all legalisms as well. You're, as a man or woman, you're in a moral capacity. They don't have a jurisdiction to transcend that. Not as a church, but as the actual reality. You start been listening to what I've been saying, you start putting this together. It's a different thought process you can come to that you don't allow. Again, you find out that you are innocent. You find these people have made a construct around you that really is mind-boggling. But it has a deeper roots why it is so deeply mind-boggling. And I don't go there much, but that's you know it's there once you get here. You know what it's about. That little voice starts talking to you in different ways, and it's not just a voice in your head. It's an authority that you better listen to, given you're on the right path. That's where you start to see what the truth of all this starts to be. Otherwise, you make up your truths and they're not. They're memes. They're the memification. That there's a wholly different world to see, and you can pull yourself into innocence. Once you see your position of innocence, then you start seeing all the attachments that we've had constructed in like I say now, the silent weapons for quiet war. It's a place they have you plugged into. You start looking for those things that shows you how you are interpreted and have done the things that you've done. So you are deemed that, but you're not that. And then you're not the things also that they've done in legalisms, make these fictions that everybody called a straw man and thought, oh, I see the straw man, it's a lie on this, all this other stuff. You didn't realize the mechanism underlying that. The foundation was entirely within the system, and you never figured something out. You never figured out. They tried to do this. This is what, like the Menard in Canada, they tried to do this, and people tried to do this, but they started commingling jurisdictions because they never learned that word. And you can't commingle jurisdictions. This is another truth of people that I've talked to, that I've talked to in the past, and really good guys. We work together fairly well. I wish I would work together a little bit more. There's a whole other understanding on how this works, and when you apply it, when you start understanding what I'm telling you in application, you start realizing you can't commingle these things, but you still need a place to be. And so you can sit there and let someone call you names. Like I said, they can let somebody put you in a status. You can let a presumption work against you. And I don't mean it in it all encompassing. They don't work that way, even though so-called patriots have believed so. There's a very particular way to address all these things, depending on what you're up to. When a mischaracterization, a defamation, a misapplication, a mischaracterization happens to you, you have to fix that. But you have to have a place that you put yourself that's also outside of what they're saying. Why? Let me go right quickly now to this land law. Why, when you see a passage, a frame, when the occupier, even if it was a legitimate one, the de jure court, said that the land is held in the United States of America even against everyone, even the United States, is a place that's separate, and a separate jurisdiction than the government. And when you understand that little thing right there, and that little passage got put in a document we just sent to inform on a judicial notice a bunch of justices that don't quite got it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We passed, folks. We just I can tell you, if you know about football, we just did a Hail Mary pass. We hope the receiver is on the other end. And if the receiver, I'll just tell you, if the receiver is not on the other end, I hope you all understand what that means. It's not just that we don't have what I've been telling you. We have a very serious problem. If any of you have any compassion for being free and a people that's self-determinant, down to you and your property, we are in a very serious way. Anyway, so it's not on me. We've done what we can. We'll see how this plays out. We'll see if there's a receiver at the other end that should be there, supposed to be there, whether that the receiver catches the ball and bobbles it, or catches the ball and makes that touchdown in law. And remember, I'm never coming at you with my opinion about all this. We can any one of you. I can do it. You can do it. It's right there to do. When I tell you that man is considered a pest animal by the fiction, by the construct, you can go read that for yourself. It's not an opinion. And then you got to sit back with that and say, not just look past it. Think, consider the dynamic of that, and consider to start extrapolating that out. Start someplace to reorient your mind. But it's not an opinion. It sounds far-fetched, but it's not. And so when you start getting this more and more, these little points that we were told that aren't so, and you start fixing them for yourself, you're going to find out you're not the pest. You're not even supposed to be aggressed. You're not supposed to be touched. But the problem is they set you up in a position where you've got no place to be. And as it came to my observation, this is years ago, about halfway through my studies, I realized the mining law gave a place to be that even the United States government, the occupier, the military force, could not touch. And it was wholly different than I was explaining to myself through reading the books on the Benedictine Admiralty I was telling you I was reading up until that time. It was even in a different reason, which was even more powerful. Now I got two reasons, two pathways of the same hands-off condition, the same jurisdiction that was not to be touched. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm putting it inside what if the so-called sovereigns, the ones in power, are going to be sovereign, they're going to have to maintain an integrity and an honesty, even though we don't see it generally. But I can point to you how often that's not actually breached, because we go to their representatives called the attorneys, and they misapply what we're doing. They don't apply what we're supposed to do correctly. In fact, I'm seeing the power, and again, if you're innocent, you get to see how you get to work through all this. You don't work in it; you work about it. You have to work about it because it's about you. It's about the condition, and it's around you. We're infiltrated and surrounded by it. It's like you're like a fish. You better figure out you're in water. And so we address this. So when these failures come up, and we realize you can see where they're not supposed to do it. We just don't opine or have a complaint, we know better, it ought to be. We say, well, no, this is your obligation. Again, and this came up in the mining district. Somebody was offering us an action that was going on, and they opened up with a condition that, in telling us, the whole group of us, the action that was going on, they opened up with an obligation, a condition that they said, well, we sent this letter and this organization, this entity didn't answer. Well, a lot of patriots, a lot of people believe if you send this tacit acquiescence thing, if I send you a letter, I guess I got to clear this up quickly here. I'll get to my tabs eventually here. Just because you send a letter to someone and you claim they have to answer and they don't, you cannot take that as acceptance. Now, I hope some mousetraps got snapped there, and we can now listen correctly. You cannot impose upon somebody, because you say so, an obligation and duty to you, that if they don't answer, they now have the obligation and duty that you say that they did, and they are now in fault. You can't do that. And these are the kinds of things that you got to look for, the elements of what constitutes attachments and things like that. You have to put those in your document too. And so what we were being told was a thing that some people are doing, which is great. I'm glad to hear they're doing it. But right out of the gate, I'm hearing serious failures of understanding basic principles. And if you want to go research this out, go look and see what the occupier, even the de jure courts, have said about that. It'll be exactly what I just told you. You can't impose an obligation on somebody just because you say so and they don't answer, then it attaches. You will have to find the obligation that you are using in order to do that. That has to be stated in the point. And if you don't do that, then you cannot impose anything. And if you go do that, you're going to be like all the other people that have and end up writing up a bunch of paper to get you in trouble. And the other guy, or woman, or whatever, even the legal entity, does not have to answer you if you're being stupid. STOOPID. If you're just making stuff up, they know what. Listen, if you want to know another authority for that, I have the right to not associate with you. So until you can show me your warrant, now we get back to our core warranto. What's your warrant that you're even approaching me? I don't have to talk with you. But so those of you that want to talk about freedom of law and this and that, you want to say, well, I'm going to make an imposition on this thing, and if it don't answer, and if it doesn't answer, then it's agreed that it's committed a crime. You're nuts. You're completely a criminal yourself. Now, I'm not saying these people are criminals, because I don't know if they understand that principle. What I'm saying, because it requires intention to do that, to be a criminal. What I'm saying is that I'm talking in the official sense. If you start doing that and think you're official, you're a criminal. Be careful. Now, you attach obligation and duty by some other third, let's say an instrument of evidence, and that says that they have the obligation and duty. This is how you're making standing anyway in a court case. If you haven't understand what I'm saying, you got to have standing. You got to say that party who, by this agreement, by this document, by this undertaking, or X, Y, Z, whatever, obligates them to me to do this, and that obligates that element was here in this part that said they were supposed to do this. They failed and caused me harm. That's a proper complaint. Now, from there, you say, you have, based on this agreement and this obligation to do so, you have to respond. And if you don't, I can at least take reliance that you failed if I needed to, depending on what our agreement is. We may have to go through another third party. I don't know. It depends on the subject matter. That's a conjecture on my part. I'm pointing out to you, there's a whole lot of other ways you start having to think about the proper application. And you don't be making it up because you think you're some sovereign man, free man authority. On the other hand, you don't not act because you think you are, but you don't have to respond. If someone's aggressing you, you have to stop. A trespasser, bad don't fix itself. A trespasser has to be stopped. And so I don't think I'm talking too quickly here or too fast on any kind of esoteric principles. But this is what we were presented, and I was fine. I don't mind hearing people's endeavors. But for me, I'm qualifying whether or not that's proper for my research, or whether I'm going to do something with it. And I hear a lot of this coming down. Again, let's go back to this invoking an insurrection. I'm not talking we're going to write I'm just not coming out of the blue cold calling the President of the United States with a letter and saying you have to do this. No, we have a lineage, a right from the authorities that are recognized by that power to go and do what we're doing in his office and through his office. And it's still only a request. And it's only going to maintain that because we don't have the power, do we, as a people? If you want to feel that power is in the people, I'm going to show you real quick that you actually don't have it, and we're back to the Civil War problem. The best we can do is continue to push and argue the part of the failure of the occupier at this point. And then yet we push in that, like I said, really simple statement, folks, that these mining claims, and this, all y'all that are renters and on patent land, and all y'all that have patents you can identify, it all pertains to you as well. These are held against the government itself. The government has no power over you. Now, they'll try to bring some power to you, but we're going to find, well, I won't go through the whole thing. I've mentioned in pieces and parts over years how they can do all the arguments. That's just attorneys making legalisms out of what the law required obligations and duties on the government not to touch. And the patents will tell you how long. Forever. So when I have that anyone cannot address the problem, even the United States government, forever, I've got a pretty nice place to settle, don't I? I have that castle that's not supposed to be infringed, don't I? And it's not infringed, it's not encroached by these legalisms, because those legalisms, the courts don't have jurisdiction. Now, I'm back to the word I told you that most people don't quite get to. Over a subject matter. And I say that, I'm wondering if you even understand what I'm saying. How does the court not have it? Well, it says it in the statute. If you go look, that it's against everyone, that this patent. So how are they getting you in? They probably stick you in commerce, and you agree, and you become mischaracterized as a commerce entity, doing a commerce thing. Because I've told you all this stuff before, and I'm kind of getting lost in my thoughts here a little bit to try and keep going on. I'll tell you, I'm just repeating myself. I don't know why I get so much slack, and why I don't see millions of people listening in. Well, because they haven't been listening. A million haven't listened and left. If a million listened and left, and then all of a sudden I see change happening in another 6 months, I would say, well, I guess I did something there. People did hear me. But until those millions show up and this broadcast and start understanding what I'm saying, we're kind of toast here, folks. And there's going to be a little crew of guys out of Jefferson Mining District that are pulling off a pretty big deal, and only to the extent that the occupier can move. And I'm concerned, even though it's the only thing, it's the last weapon we have to embarrass them into doing something correctly and or making enough non-opinionated facts for everybody to see in the proper way that not even the occupier itself, even a de jure officer, can deny. That enough people see what is really going on, that you all act in the proper way. In other words, you can't sit there even after you see it. You have to figure out what you're going to do within the context of this problem. And this is what we're looking at, what I've been looking at, and what I think everybody understands, but doesn't want to develop it more than an opinion. As I said before, we are in a serious way, and it's going to take the people to stop being divided, stop working on all your social, economic, environmental nonsense that they keep throwing and foisting on you, and the psyops that they're doing. Stop all that and start looking at this more correctly. If you don't, we're toast. We're just toast. And don't worry about all the rest of the population, but it's going to take enough of us. And so I come every week, hope out of mind in a way. I don't see it happening. I see a little band of merry men in a mining district that are pulling some interesting and cool stuff off, and this little story with the Invocation of Insurrection Act reminds me of that. Why is that being invoked right now? It's not like it hasn't been invoked, so don't think that we're doing a martial law. They did it I think in L.A. or something over some riots. They do this periodically. They have these tools to come in and it's under police powers. It's underneath the right of the government to keep peace for everybody. People will blow this out of place, but I can see a very direct correlation to what the letters we have before the president on a constitutional crisis that's guaranteed by Congress to be executed upon by him. That I'm almost hoping this is a cover. This immigration thing's a cover for that. This would be just, we'd never know. But I guess I want to extend this to you all too, not just the JMD guys. That if this is coming in as a stealth move, this would be pretty brilliant, actually. I can see, I don't expect it because I don't think anybody's here that brilliant. I don't care how much he calls himself a genius. But I can see it. I can see this coming in just as stealthy and as effective as anything else. And so I guess I'm asking you all to put your mind to that. And those of you at JMD understand that this is an interesting development about this invoking the Insurrection Act. It all comes in the time after what we have the notices and no response. And so, don't know if there's a connection or not. Let me get on to a continuing problem that's going to be harassing y'all, and has been harassing y'all out there where in California with PG&E. I've moved these tabs way up. They got buried like a lot of this stuff does, but it's become relevant today. The PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric in California, and all those fires that have been going on, and all this stuff, and the scant coverage I've been given to it, but I think it's been complete enough to keep a tab on what's going on. It came up in the news again relative to the campfire and who caused that. And I didn't read the report on that, but there's too many little things too many problems with the way they're reporting it that are very consistent with the tub fire, that I bring the tub fire report up. That was done a year before that, and the findings on that. But I wanted to point out something here. Not the PG&E and the fire. Those are serious. Those are problems. You need, if you guys live in California, you need to jump on this because these people this company's going to kill you all. And it's not going to help. The Forest Service is not helping that with their urban rural divide problem in their interfaces with the public lands and their national forests and their mismanagement of all that, which we keep track of, and we have to because of the subject matter of the land of the Jefferson Mining District information view on all this production. We have a pretty wide, comprehensive scope to look at that brings and pulls all this together. It also allows us to see this other insurrection that's come in through we call it Agenda 21. The attorneys doing it. Remember, they're promoting sustainable development, and it's a crime against us. It's a big fraud, a big treason. No one wants to really kind of go there and understand how. They'll say it. Lots of people can say it, but it's a difference between just being able to say it because you heard it and be able to track back how. And I want you all to be able to look at your problems and track back how. Go to the beginning point. Don't just let knowledge, just for the sake of it, do much. I mean, I can talk to you lots about how a lot of this stuff is created and who the originators are, but we're past the origination. We're now into people are working to destroy. There's armies of people destroying us. Companies are doing it. We all focus on the corporatocracy problem, and corporations are getting above us and over us and controlling us. And I'm just going to let you know we're letting it, because there's many avenues on how we stop this. In the news from a while back, after the Tubbs fire and the damage happened to be the second worst fire in California history, almost not quite a year later, the Camp Fire in Paradise pops up is the worst. And I want to tie these things together, because there's something that's very important to understand when you're studying how to figure out what's going on. I've told you that sometimes there's a lot of information in the omission, and look for the omissions. Remember, felonies can be committed by omission. If a commission by omission is even is not an oxymoron. You can omit to do something that becomes the felony. And this is a very interesting observation. The silence between the sound is very important to keep a track of. It's sometimes how I can track through things, and people don't understand what they're looking at. And I'm saying, let me put it in less esoteric. You have to be read enough to know what ought to have happened. Now, this is ought, because there's a rule that says someone should follow it. Must follow it doesn't mean an imperative. They can make mistakes. But if it's written down as an objective basis that they ought to follow it, and they didn't, that's an omission. You're not going to see a record of the omission. You have to know it's an omission by you keeping track, keeping right on the point of the facts, and don't lose your sight on that. Keep yourself in the moment of your study so that you can keep track of the things that didn't happen. It's a whole other train of thought going on. You're going through, okay, well, this official was supposed to do this because you've read about that they have to do that, and then you read past that point. Your mind should stop and say, they failed to do that. You document that point, the omission to do something. At that point, you're going to start finding why the train starts to come off the track, but you're going to have an objective basis that the official was supposed to do. Well, let's say he's just a non-official trespasser, but there may be a principle they were supposed to regard that they didn't, and when they didn't regard it, that created their obligation and duty to you. And so I'm pointing out again, as I started this conversation without even knowing I was going to go there by going through this insurrection thing, you can't just attach somebody because you say you to put a demand on someone in a letter, they don't answer you, and all of a sudden that makes them liable to you. No, you have to be able to go back to the beginning of your rights and know what they are, and know how someone transgressed you, where they are omitting to fulfill the law. They're operating in a silent area. You have to identify that. And this PGE condition is, when you have to go read some of the reports, it shows you how that works. And right in front of your face, they're telling you something if you were to look a little deeper. And then it comes into one of these agenda things as well. But a while back, PG&E claims rates could skyrocket 5-fold if it was ordered to clear trees and inspect electricity system. Caught my mind and my crazy bone here, my little laugh bone. I started laughing for some reason. I didn't know why. I mean, it just, are these people that stupid that they would actually say that to a judge? The PG&E claimed that their rates would skyrocket if they were told that if they were ordered to clear the trees and inspect their electrical system. Folks, don't you think that's part of the deal for them? For it? It's a company. It's a utility. PG&E warned in a new court filing that it would have to spend at least $75 billion, as a B, folks, $75 billion, hire 650,000 workers, and increase monthly utility bills by a huge amount. A huge, 8 with an H. If it's forced to comply with a federal judge's proposed order for a massive maintenance and inspection effort for its electricity grid. First of all, you should be terrified if you're around this company that they're not doing this. They should be doing it as a matter of course. This judge ends up catching that. Because I asked immediately about that. Do they want to go there? They're telling you folks that they are not going to invest this maintenance. And they'll do it even if it's going to hurt you. And they'll fight and claw against having to do it even if a federal judge tells them. is not a public utility company that I'd want to be living around, first of all. But it actually came out of their mouth in a formal way here, folks. If you don't understand the danger, you're all in. And again, I could read on and on. This is fascinating stuff. They tried to go through the bankruptcy thing, essentially, and they're on the brink of insolvency. Well, I think they are insolvent now. But see, that insolvency doesn't kill them. That's one of the good things about bankruptcy. The wisdom was that since we're working on fiction anyway and fantasy fiat, we don't have to destroy our people. We don't have to destroy our instrumentalities, our governments. We'll just put them on new judge reviewed operations, and we'll try to get them back into being more operating better. Even your local insurance for cars is written the same way. That was a measure to mitigate the harm. Otherwise, a direct loss could destroy a company. And the government didn't want that to happen. They wanted the commerce to continue. So they said, well, what's the better answer? The better answer is to make this insurance system. So if you get a judgment against you, now they do this backwards. Now you have to have the insurance. No, it was supposed to be done after, and your payments were based on the judgment. If you go read your motor vehicle code, you'll see that's inside there. If you read about insurance. Insurance was supposed to come after a judgment of the court, otherwise it was a takings. But we've gone so far away from understanding all this stuff, people don't understand how to begin looking at this, that this company comes in and says, we're going to be insolvent. The judge says, yeah, but insolvency doesn't mean you can't go do the inspections. In fact, it's part of what you have to do to run the system. My word to you is this company intends to not do what it means to keep you in danger. Remember, the other report was this company in 1 year had caused 14 of the 15 fires in those areas that had lots of trees. So this is I don't know how far to go with this. If you're not interested, it doesn't matter, I guess. But those of you that live in this area really should pay attention to this. Another report back then said that PGE shares are halted after company cleared of the deadliest 217 wildfire. So in 217 there was one fire that they didn't have, and again the people who are at Wall Street, they caused the value of that stock to go up. This is all just playing games. So they're all looking. This became news. This wasn't news that their system was dilapidated and they aren't going to inspect it and bring it up. They're not going to keep the nature away from the infrastructure. No, as soon as they weren't under liability under one of the fires, investors jumped in, speculators jumped in. Again, this is your life. This is not really something that your home power should be anywhere. Even your society's power should be based in. And I guess my main focus, this company was willing to tell a judge, well, if you make us maintain our system, you're going to cause us lots of money, and that's going to go back to the ratepayer. Well, that's a truth and a non-truth. I mean, you're supposed to do it anyway, but you have to go to the Utilities Commission and petition for that. Now, you all are supposed to be on the other side saying, no, they can't do that. That's part of what they do. If they can't manage their system, we need to get a new manager of the system. Call it what you want. Call it PG&E. Call it utilities company. Call it whatever. They're supposed to supply power, and they're obligated to do it safely and continuously. It's all in the law, folks, if you just read. We don't have to be subjected to this nonsense. Pointing out a dynamic, though. This is the year before the Camp Fire, remember? And within these stories were other truths coming out if you took just a bit of time to start reading around. I'm not interested in all this necessarily, but I understand. I need to know the battlefield. We're up against this stuff. Some people are in the 5G. We're up against this sort of thing in the smart meters. We're up against this with any corporation that's looking out for its bottom line, which they are mandated by law to look out for. Not your safety, their fiscal health. And that ties us back to what the government's all about the commerce and the economy of the nation, the GDP and all that stuff. It's all pretty much all that it's focused on. And so I look at this stuff because I don't know where the enemy's sitting and how they're doing this stuff to cause all these abilities to go into so-called commissions that are supposed to be giving a license to continue to do their harm. And until you see that, you can't even begin to address this. And so I say, based on that suggestion, they're cleared in one case, but in another case they're saying, well, you can't. if you force us to maintain our system, it's going to cost a lot of money, and the ratepayers are going to be penalized. In that case, the judge saw through the nonsense. I was shocked to even hear it, to the point that I made a tweet about long back. It says, "Is this an admission that PG&E has been derelict in its obligations and duties to cut trees and inspect the system without that funding? Does it really want to go there? A judge is going to allow that?" These are rhetorical questions. Obviously, they don't want to do that, but they're telling you they're going there. What did I say there in particular for what I was saying before about assessing some obligation and duty to someone, and the default of the answer of which to solve the problem, then you claim was right here, the obligation and duty to clear the trees. You have to go to the law that says that they have to do that. Once you do that, now you have your connection that if you see by their admission that they don't, that you can bring that as a cause, and you can bring that as another cause against them on top of this case. And I don't like that myself, but that's where we are. And this again, we're back into equity. We're not suing them for money. We're suing them to do their duty, and because of the harm to you. And the prospective harm is also actual, though the courts are trying to say that they're not. It is, and you just have to know that. You have to research enough to hear this stuff. So I was shocked to see that they would even broach the idea, because that's just obviously saying, again, rhetorical question. They are derelict, folks. They don't care about your safety. They don't care they're burning up the forests and the trees and the houses. This is a year before the campfire, and nobody really moved it. So what did I say before about looking in the silence? Let's get back a little bit to that. The omission. These guys are pretty clever. And I guess that's the other reason I'm interested to read where I find. Sometimes you don't see much, but sometimes you can find it. I found a little bit in this tub fire report that happened a year before the campfire, and I think it's relevant to now the determination that happened today, because all the words about how they decided it were the same. They put the liability onto the corporation, which is not really going to do much of anything, but they did it in a way that's not really criminally culpable. Even though they could, because we also know that PG&E, I think, has multiple felonies against it as a corporation. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know about many felons that have many rights after they go through that can continue to do what they're doing to continue to hurt people. And this is one of the failures, and one of the things that the Bar Association figured out how to pull out so that we couldn't kill these corporations, make them civilly dead, like any patriot wouldn't have heard a long time ago, make them civilly dead so they can't function. And so they would stop killing people. But in the Tubbs report, for the PG&E and the fire, I want to speak now to the silence that was sitting there, a glaring silence. You really have to read that report and keep your mind on what's going on. They're very clever. You can pick up on it because their wording starts to get kind of fuzzy, kind of weird. You start to say, they're trying, your intuition will tell you they're trying to hide something here. You don't know what it is, but you have to keep reading. And you start pulling these details together, the silence, the omissions to speak about certain things, and how you pick some of that up in this time in this report. I have links to my blog, to my Twitter that I saved for this purpose to talk to you about then. You have to keep the dots together, and how I identified the silence in particular places was that they weren't silent in other places on the same subject matter, in the same report. And so there's a little technique on how you go through looking at what someone's telling you and what they're trying to figure, and then you figure out what they're not telling you, but you can use what they did tell you before on one thing that they ought to have told you on another in the same capacity, and then they don't. And that's not the point. You just remember what it was they didn't speak about. What part didn't they, and you have to start making a list over there. So this is all done in your mind as in real time, or as you're writing notes, if you have a chance to listen to or read a report or whatever. I was highlighting things and copying them over to a notepad, keeping track of certain things and just anomalies until I could start making sense of it. Now, this Tubbs fire is an interesting report, and if you go read through it, I find it very interesting on, again, the silence. That in the report, and this is where we're going to start pointing out where the potential problem is, and this points out to another failure, another type of silence that you didn't hear on them complaining that they have to clear the trees away from their lines or maintain the system, is what kind of a system are they building? Is another type of a problem here that starts to be evidenced in this Tubbs fire, which we already know is a problem from those of you that are in, well, I'm going to lead you now, with smart meters. Because in the report, they talk about all kinds of interesting things, and they do mention smart meters. but it was only relevant to other properties, not where appears the fire, they say the fire started. And in these documents, you'll be reading for where the problem may be starting. They always point to the fire. It's what I found interesting is they'll say it was the lines, the power lines that were causing it. And yet you'd read the report, and they have an omission to something that's inside the report, and they actually state that they give a question as to whether the lines could be there. They have evidence it looks like it might be. You see all the conditional words. And then you find this glaring silence within the report, where in this case, and you'll get, again, if you want to go through and follow this a little bit, and there's a whole lot more. I'm only doing this through Twitter just to kind of tell people, we got a problem with a lot of this. If you folks are in California and you folks are dealing with PG&E and the officials that are there and the people who write the reports and the Utilities Commission, there's a secret going on right in front of your face, and unless you identify it, you won't be able to call them on it, and they're going to continue to kill people. When they mention in these documents at page 29, again, just two of a many, that they didn't talk about the investigators assisted, when they did the so-called forensics about the study of this, they assisted in the removal of smart meters. You get to page 54, I started on page 29 when I get this message, there's one note that I had, and I got to page 54, and they talk about something else. They said, quote, that they collected the weatherhead and associated conductor was found and later collected. The weatherhead and associated conductor was found and later collected. Now, when you read in context, they explain what they have been collecting all this time through various properties. They assisted in the removal of smart meters, but they didn't say they were assisted in removal at that one property where they found the weatherhead and associated conductor. In fact, there was no meter there mentioned. There was no meter there at all identified. And it is where, adjacent to that, to the house, adjacent there, was where the fire started. The omission is that they collected smart meters everywhere else but this one piece of evidence. The weatherhead and associated conductor was not attached to a meter, was it? And so, right here, and there's quite a few other things, you start to see that they were hedging and fudging about what actually caused the fire, because they didn't say the fire was caused by that part. They actually can't refer to it, right? Because it's not there. If they mention it, they have to have collected it. But they didn't collect that smart meter there. It wasn't even in the connected parts they did collect. How, folks? I mean, the place that they were there didn't suffer a bill. At any rate, the point is that they mentioned they're removing smart meters. They don't mention one there. They mention collecting the things that would have been attached to the smart meter, and they don't mention that. That when you look very carefully, they don't blame the power lines in tubs, and they don't blame the smart meters, which is the very thing they need to protect against, which means, for those of you in California and everywhere else, this is a high-level secret that they need to cover up, and they're doing it by omission. Now, we come to today as we move through this thing. Well, one more story here that I got a while back, that the federal judge looked at the case here, and he looked at the evidence, and he blasts the criminal PGE's clear-cut pattern of starting fires. We have a serial arsonist in California called the PG&E, as determined by a judge, if you wanted a higher level than myself here to say. I'm showing you that in the silence of the reports, it says the very same thing. And they're getting away with it. And they're going to continue to get away with it until someone down there... Anyway, it's going to be all over the place here. These smart meters are just blowing up and causing problem. And I'm not talking the radiation and all that. They're just dangerous pieces of equipment. Now, if you settle too much on this, I'm going to show you ahead of time. I'll explain to you. You're walking yourself into a problem that they haven't yet, but they can make these things much more robust so they don't do this. And so if you impliedly agree to the smart meter at all, they'll fix that part that's causing the failure, and then you'll be stuck with the other problems of the smart meter after you've argued this wrong. And they get you down into, they change the question. You ask the wrong question, you're going to get the right answer first of all, or they offer you the wrong question, and then they change the only solutions you have. But I've also Twittered that out through another comment that came through, a video that explains in a parody of a condition how they can get you to think anything they want, get you to be voting in any direction they want by simple adjustment of terms and twists of phrase, and then offering you something that's offering you something that you think is a completely right answer, and they've trapped you. In this case, they're offering up an absence of something, and you don't know that. And so you look right past the very problem that they're trying to hide. Perfect. These people are brilliant, actually. So a federal judge looks in this PG&E thing. This is overall, folks. This is in their Chapter 11 bankruptcy thing. And he determines a clear-cut pattern of starting fires. I don't know why more people didn't jump on this. Clear-cut pattern, folks. That's now getting into RICO. And those of you that are in in smart meters, which 5G is a part and not the direct part, so be careful on jumping over into there too fast. You're going to have to make a real hard connection to that. But the smart meter condition, if I'm showing you, if the judge just said there's a clear-cut pattern and I'm explaining to you there's a RICO, and you have a motive for why this is going on, you have another avenue of attack on the smart meter. Because that's the thing they're trying to protect that they're not going to mention. They're going to mention that, it appears that this started on a power line. And it wasn't a power line at all. When you look at the evidence, they didn't even mention there was a smart meter location. There ought to have been attached to the things they did collect for their forensic study. And the author of the study knows how to write that to keep that away from you. And that's where I started. This guy was really slick, but he wasn't that slick. I was putting myself in his position. Like, why would I talk like that? If I'm standing there on that ground and I'm looking at something and looking at what he's describing to me, and in my mind's eye, I say this, I picture this thing. Why would I speak like he's speaking? There's something wrong here. You got to put yourself in the moment. It's kind of like I tell you, build your chronology. Put yourself in the moment of the times, in the sequential times. Get your mind into that space, not just look at it at a distance and document a sequence of times. No, put yourself down in the time. At this time, this set of conditions was happening relative to this issue. And then something else happened in time right after, in this set. Don't look at it from afar. Put yourself into the situation. Put yourself into the report. You can only look through this report. You can only know what they said, but you can start thinking, well, why would they speak like that? And after a while, something bubbles up inside that speaks to you. Then you have to go track that back and verify it, because sometimes your mind will miss stuff. I had to do it on this. It took a little while to kind of work through this, so I started seeing it. But now I have a clear-cut pattern determined by a judge. I'm now working toward RICO, for those of you that are looking around this stuff. I don't know what's going to stop these people. All I know is if I can get enough people that are going to go take it up that they don't want to see their houses burn and their forests burn, with the aid of the Forest Service, who doesn't care to go look at this either, and doesn't do their urban interfaces very nicely, then you're going to have a lot more damage to property. You're going to have a lot more of this agenda coming on as you're hearing. They're not allowing you to build, or you got to do new standards. Like I told you was going to come on. Another thing that just occurred to me, it gets you away from the DEW nonsense. It puts you on the ground where the cause is real. There's a function behind this, and if you keep going DEW, you're not going to go to that smart meter. You're not going to go to this, the maintenance of their systems, their excuse, it'll cost us money. Folks, that was already supposed to be factored in. So now I'm wondering if whether or not the court, they just told the court a fraud, because now they've been stealing the money for that all this time. Did you think about maybe that one while I was talking? See, it's lots to be looking at. If we want to handle the problems that we face, and I don't think this is a small one because of the fire potential and the people that die. People die around this. Property is destroyed. Lives are destroyed. A way of life is also destroyed. And I don't mean you just living in suburbia around the trees. I'm talking about the way they move the agenda in. I'm talking about the costs that they now come on you even more. They admitted that they don't do the maintenance that was required under the law for them to do, and they've already taken the money for that. Boy, didn't that raise red flags over like the Klamath removal project. No one has the right to do what they're doing. They've been stealing from the ratepayers up in Oregon now, the Klamath River system there, for years. Going to partnerships. Stakeholders, folks. These are all the same agenda I keep talking about. You don't think you think it's just PG&E and a corporation and corporatocracy? No. Stop. Back up and start really looking at this stuff. This is killing people. Following a series of massive fires, now in this court case, along its 125,000 miles of power lines over the last 2 years, Judge William Alsup, who is overseeing PG&E's probation for safety violations that led to felony convictions for the 2010 explosion of one of its gas pipelines, which killed 8 people, didn't back down from his criticism of the utility despite being told he had overreached. Quote, usually a criminal on probation is forthcoming and admits what they need to admit. You haven't admitted much, Alsop told attorneys for the company at hearing Wednesday in a federal court in San Francisco. There's a clear pattern here. That PG&E is starting these fires, is a quote out of the judge, what he said from this report. I don't know what more you need for those of you that are sitting under this threat, this arsonist in California, or really anywhere else you start to see it manifest itself. I don't know what more you need to start your study, folks. There's a path here, pathway. I think this is what can start you on it. If you live around the forest, especially the ones around the forest, because it gets so out of hand. Those of you in the urban wild interface up there in California, these stories in a line, the way they wrote that report are line items in a statement of how you show these people are really organized criminals and they're getting away with it. And how they're going about, you point out, see, it's one thing to have an opinion. It's much better and easier to be able to present your opinion when you have the very fact of it. And that's what I try to show you do in the record. And you can move this thing along. One more story here is all these things I had together that I had to blow by because there's so much to talk about. PG&E power lines caused California's deadliest fire. Another report about who the causation of what this is. It's not DEW. And when you go read the reports, it's not DEW. I want to get those people that you want to put that kind of energy in that. Why don't you put it into something substantial and go stop this problem? Stop wasting your time and stop hurting other people by misdirecting them. Investigators with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection have concluded the Pacific Gas and Electric equipment, they didn't say power lines, and this is the problem, it's their equipment at the meter, remember. Pacific Gas and Electric equipment caused a devastating campfire that destroyed nearly 14,000 homes and killed 85 people, most of them elderly. So guess who they're preying on now, I suppose? Now, I don't need to talk about it more, folks. They said equipment. They didn't say power lines. Be very careful on the subtle omission. It's the same omission that they did in the Tubbs fire. The official report. Yet you tear through that report with a fine-tooth comb. You do a forensic study on the report and you start to see a different picture. And you can start compiling this stuff in order to make it so that you are effective in what you say, that you have the power to stop the power here. When you have some official documentation, go ahead and use it. What's the problem with that? Now, and I made a comment to that story. SMART is implicitly shown in the report. I was referring to the Tubbs, but in the absence of the crucial evidence mentioned and not completely described and not collected, and absence of any evidence of any meter at that home. I don't remember power lines proven a cause in that report. A disappointment? Yeah, they're disappointed. The CEO is disappointed because 5G is going to get caught here, folks. It's through the smart meter. The thing that they call equipment and the thing they won't identify and the thing they'll talk to, but they won't say was found at the place of the fire. They'll get you right up into the area, and unless you put your mind mentally down right where they're talking and stand there in the mind's eye, stand there and look and remember what you're supposed to be seeing in a normal installation, and then go read the report on and look for what's missing in that. You probably will miss that little detail. And it's one little, as I'm thinking about this, is a very important tool that you need to develop in yourself. Putting yourself exactly, don't make it up, put yourself right where and you have to kind of make it up a bit because you've never been there and never seen it. But go through whatever evidence you have and stand on the ground. Stand wherever you have to stand, and in your mind's eye, look at your environment. Analyze it for what is supposed to be there by what you think is supposed to be there by the objective basis, not what you think like opinion. If I have a drop, I know I'm going to have a wire, a head. I'm going to have a conduit down to a box. And in that box is going to be a meter, and inside that's going to be some phenolic, and inside that's going to be some copper wires and some insulation, and below that's going to be another conduit and a post, folks. I'm going to have a post, and it's going to be attached in a certain way with certain hardware. I'm standing there looking at it. When I see a report that only says I've got the head and the conduit, I'm missing a whole lot of parts there. The omission tells me something. The lack of information tells me something. And then they called that equipment. But what was missing? Now, you have to go deeper even. What I'm trying to point out to you today is you're going to be doing some studies, whether that's forensics in the law, really getting deep down and actually understanding the condition, whether it's forensics of a report, whether it's looking at the condition. You need to get down and look at everything, and even the things that are not there. Am I making stuff up about that? No, it's condition. Am I saying there was a meter and not meter? Well, they said there was meters in that area. Those are done on a class, and it was within the confines of a place where they had installed them, and that was the place where the fire started is the only one that didn't say there was a meter there. Within the context of the report, I can say that they did not say there was a meter there. Why? Well, maybe we're focused on the problem, right? And that attaches to a bigger agenda. I don't get that out of the report. I get that out of a more comprehensive understanding of what's going on in this country. And so you have to bring what you bring. You have to be, when I say you got to be there, you have to be there. You have to have a lots in you when you do it. You're not going to do it by thinking in a chat room or just kind of looking out in the world and seeing all the problems. It doesn't come that way. None of this comes that way. I guess I wish it was by osmosis. You could just pick it up, but we're being hit from so many places. We just need all of us to start looking at these problems and starting to dig in. Those of you that are natural investigators, dig in here, folks. You may not even be the guy or gal that can move the next step. I don't know. Like I said, I think people working in teams of 3 would be nice. If you can't do anything else, find 2 more of you that just need to fix this. One of you might be the investigator that can pour through this like I would do it, pull out all the facts, and then I'd hand it off to the next interested activist, if I can call it that, or the helper, whatever your team is going to be, your crew, and I hand it off what I found to them, and they're better at doing the next step. And then you hand it off to the final one that's better to execute all that once you compile it all together, and you prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt what you're doing, whatever it is. Some that'll take more work than others. So this looking in, I guess the point about some of this forensics came from this article here coming on, really looking deep, really looking sharp. And when you look into, as you do your investigation, like I tell the miners, become the investigative reporter when you're confronted by, especially the agents, the government officials. Become an investigative reporter. Same thing here. You're going to reanalyze reports. You're going to do your forensic study. You're going to pick it apart for everything. And so we move on now in this theme of forensics relative to I want to show you how you look at stuff in order to become effective in what you do, to extract out what you may not be explained, but what comes out in other ways, like this judge saying, well, you guys are serial arsonists, you guys are felons. Normally you're more forthcoming. That's all elements, folks. That they're not forthcoming is a problem for them now. If you were to empower that by stating it as a element for what's going on, and they do this multiple times. You have to have the the word just slipped from my mind. It starts with the predicate acts. Excuse me. Predicate acts in like a RICO. I can see them. They're already there. You have it all. Those of you that want to stop this or get to work, put a lot of pressure here to stop the death and destruction, it's right there to do. In other words, I don't look at the news to be told, oh, this is what the news is. No, I'm looking at it they're telling me this is the notice, and yet it's a lie. There's something in it that's a lie. The omission is a lie. When they blame it on equipment without saying specifically like let's say it's a smart meter, it is a smart meter, and they omit to say that, and I know that it's attached to a different agenda to do that. Why the motive for that? That's a crime. Because you're also getting to the point that they don't want to inspect for the actual fault. And if you do that wrong, you're never going to solve it, and more people continue to be at risk. What I tell you, even if climate change was correct, but they have it wrong, and they do the wrong thing, they could bring on more death and destruction by doing the wrong thing instead of actually being honest about what is actually the cause. And it looks very clearly right now, if you're talking global warming and we're going into global cooling, all your so-called mitigation is going to be to hasten death. And then you find out, for those of us that want to research further, that is the point. They want to hasten death. They want to have population control. Right? So we have another motive. We have another mechanism. We can tie it together. Nice, close dots. Now, whether or not that goes beyond a reasonable doubt, or whether or not reasonable doubt is the crime you're going to charge, or we can go less for just a lesser standard for a conviction in a civil side, that's up to the remedy that you choose. But to sit back and just complain about it and laugh at it and do nothing while they're coming and killing us is not going to work. So, we're going to the story of forensics investigation, another serious problem, again, right in the thing I talked about all the time, the military consequence that you live under, the military occupation you be locally. The administrative division the state is, you think you got states' rights. No, they're administrative military districts. We can find all the proof for that. Just go through the codes. I've mentioned them periodically. Forensics investigation finds cops shot each other, then murdered the Houston couple. Remember the Houston couple that was supposedly invaded, their house was invaded, and they were blamed to be drug dealers. Well, it finds out the forensic investigation after the police investigation found that the cops shot each other, and then they murdered the Houston couple, as in blaming, and again, you're too smart and too psychologically stable to be a cop. Folks, we have a problem there, for those of you that want to step up. In particular, I kind of like Texas. All you guys in Texas, you want to don't mess with Texas? They're messing with you. It's time for you to step up in the proper way. You can take some of this little study. I don't know where you're going to go with it because I'm not really focused on that, but you have some serious problems with the military down there and the costumes of the police, the peacekeepers that are killing people, making stories up and getting away with a lot of it until it gets so bad that they can't, and then only a few people get taken down. It doesn't adjust the system. The murder of an innocent Houston, I'd like to say the innocent couple, right? Because they never went through due process. They never enjoyed the final decision to the Supreme Court denying you your right to have your case reviewed when they said you were guilty. You didn't even get that. These people were shot, murdered, executed right on the spot. As I told you, it was coming, and as I told you, you have the ability to start. You better push back, or it's going to get worse. The murder of an innocent Houston couple made national headlines early this year as police took to smearing their names and threatening those who didn't believe their official narrative. As the months passed, we learned that the Houston Police Department's raid on the homes of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas was based on lies, and they were murdered for no reason. Now, there's a little bit of opinion here, and that's fine. It's a serious thing. I don't want to. I'm just reading the context here. None of this stuff has actually been proven except the forensic report that shows it. The evidence indicates different than the official narrative. Now the case has reached a turning point after the family hired a forensics expert to examine the home and found that there is no evidence that the officers encountered gunfire. Now I can go on and on and on. You go through, you read it. It took someone who has trained themselves to think very clearly and very openly and look at all evidence and not disregard anything in order to go through and counter the official narrative. This is telling you that is on you now. We live in that time when the presumption of innocence is absolutely gone. The presumption of a sovereign power to kill you is absolutely there, and you will have to overcome that. This is not a good sign for those of you that think that you're living in a society at all where you think that you have rights that weren't encumbered by a military occupation. That continues because you allow it to continue. I'm not saying everything will be perfect. The angels don't sing just because you get involved. The point was, as I keep referring to Thomas Jefferson saying, it took an educated mass who were vigilant. We haven't been for tons of time, if time can be tons. That this thing has gone off the rails so far, it's going to take a whole lot more work. That I see in this story the method of how you start to come back. You start to move this thing backwards by other people doing what they find they have to do. Apparently this is to my mind, this violated people's conscience enough that they did hire the forensics expert. Whether or not that would stand up in a court, I don't know. This is not about that, though. This is about getting this fact out to people and start to put pressure onto the authorita that believes it can make this stuff up, come in, be the Keystone Cops, and then shoot innocent people to try and cover that up. Then we get to the part what the tactics are on how these goons are now, the attorneys have told them how to avoid the problem simply by resigning if they have to. And that all of a sudden now that's supposed to exonerate the problem. All that has to be fixed anymore, even in face of the military consequence. Because remember, what did they say? The Supreme Court, Tim's is really an interesting case. The more I think about it, we did include the summary of that case applied to the letter we just sent, the judicial notice equity enforcement we just sent to the Supreme Court. That case says that these people had the right not to have their lives taken down to a livelihood on this. And not that I want to diminish their lives being taken based to that, but if you see what happens here, you have the power to bring to the local jurisdictions that would allow and train or not scrutinize their officers that allow them to consider that officers can get to here to do this. That they think they can get away with it at all and they can fabricate this stuff in the moment. That they think that that'll get them out of it. That they can even go there has to be stopped. But Tim starts to show you an authority that their military officers have to follow. It may not be enough, but it's a start for those of you that don't know where to begin. You keep asking me, what do I have to learn? That's what I'm telling you. Go read that. That's how you apply it. The problem is you haven't made a decision on what to do, what wrong you need to make right. That's, to me, the big impediment. You're not going to learn enough because there's nothing you're going to focus on. And as soon as you jump in, you'll be learning plenty. And it won't be in a negative way. I mean, not that learning's always a good thing. What I'm saying is that you're going to be learning on a focused attack to stop a harm, which likely, because of the, good people listening to this broadcast, you're likely going to do it for a bigger cause. I just have to have faith that's what goes on. Some of us will do it for the private cause, and that's okay too. You got to learn that part. But a lot of this stuff is societal. And you save it for yourself, and you speak in terms of saving it for others, and you will, and you're standing better than if you tried to say, I'm doing this selfishly. And so it took a forensic that someone had to hire. In other words, cha-ching out of your pocket. It should never be like this. And so I said should, but it is. That's reality. You have to kind of look in the world and say, well, if nothing's happened to me now, but look at if it does, what I'm going to have to do. That's if I'm alive. It's almost like a business investment that they've enforced on everybody, that as the military starts adjusting to steal more from you and justify it, you have to start putting out more buffer, if you will, and typically that's all done in cash. In other words, if you don't build that reserve, even in the fiat, and it happens to you, the likelihood of you surviving is as likely as these people who died who were innocent. We have a big systemic problem. I don't know how to solve it all. I can just tell you if we do nothing, it's going to get worse because bad don't fix itself. And if you don't do that and you don't get engaged, you're not going to have the experience in order to know how. Not even to start. And so many people I talk with, when we talk about, I'm listening to what they say, especially when I worked with them and we talk in how they address something. I'm listening to what they're learning, how they're responding. I don't care that mistakes, I really don't care about, especially if they've recovered. If they have a mistake, we'll fix the mistake. That's easy. But I'm looking at it as someone who didn't succumb to becoming a slave to false authority, who's still standing there in front of me and didn't get shot, who didn't get beat down. There's a big self-evident proof. I'm standing there looking at someone who's going through a problem that they worked on and feeling that they made a mistake. And I said, no, your mistakes are fixable because you're still here to fix them. This thing isn't so cut and dry. And if you don't walk into it, you may feel bad about it. You didn't do quite it. Maybe you put your standard up against someone like myself. You hear my words and you think you got to meet that standard. It's not that tedious. It's not that strenuous. What the point is are you learning on how to move around the mistakes you make? Because you can make them. The ones you can't make are the ones that are final. And I try to show you how to stay away from that. This kind of a condition, that's a surprise attack on you. You can't fix that one. These people were oblivious to this attack, as oblivious as you'd be if someone came in under community care or some trumped-up charge and kicked your door in, shot your dog, and then shot the guy behind. The guy was shot by the guy behind me, and so I shot the guy that I'm staring at and shot his wife too. Because I got to protect my brother. I got to protect that blue line. Not even smart enough to know that there may be a difference in the caliber of gun being used and the bullet recovered. Fascinating what goes on. This is criminal mindsets. This is a surprise attack. You can't know enough to protect yourself against this one, folks. So if you're not jumping in and doing something, taking even my lead, you don't have to even follow what I'm saying. Well, it's to the point that I'm saying keep out of jeopardy. Follow that much. But if you're not going to help jump in for yourself, even on the small stuff, you'll never be prepared for the tougher stuff, and you cannot. Nobody. I could not be prepared for something like that. That's a societal thing that we have to come to terms with on a bigger scale. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. If I turned my attention to something like that, if I was living in Houston and I felt that threatened, which I would probably start to feel kind of threatened, and I could turn my attention to that, I think within about 6 months to a year, a group of people could solve that, could get that straightened up. And so I'm just saying, you just got to turn your attention to it. I'm not there. I don't have that problem. I don't think in the area that we are, although we do have community care as an overriding condition. But now if I was going to turn my attention to that instead of what we're doing, I can now know I have the Tim's case to say. In that other case, it says that you can't apply community care in that regard. It fails. That reasoning fails. Well, community care is also attached to Agenda 21. So there. See how fast you got there without even knowing it? It's the same thing with, what was it? Enhanced 911. I used the word enhanced. I used the code word. It's international imposition. Enhanced 911. You didn't know 911 was that way, but you can now know that the enhanced 911 was exactly that condition. It's tied into the global data circuit and the global construction, which community care is then dispatched for. So if you jump in, you are going to be touching the main problems of our life wrongly imposed that have become normal. The new normal, you're already suffering it. These people, Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas, I'm going to go by name. They're innocent. They paid the ultimate price. You think there's a soldier here? You think these people don't deserve the highest honors? We better really change what we think is going on in the world about who we think are the heroes here. At any rate, so forensics, folks, is going to turn. It turns the tide. It's you just getting involved. You forensically investigate whatever it is. You have to put your own thinking cap on. Look with a clear mind at what's supposed to be. As I tell you, look at the omission. Look at the omission, but you have to have a mind of what ought to have been in reality. Now, you don't make up this stuff. Ought to have been in reality, as applied to the PG&E. What would I see if I'm standing outside a home? It's gone too, because it's all burned up. What if I go to a normal mobile home, a regular home? What am I going to see hooked up to the power company? And then I compare that. You have to know that in your mind's eye, and then attach that to the report and say, wait a minute, they're missing a whole bunch of parts and pieces here, aren't they? And then you see they suddenly say, oh, it was just PG&E equipment. It's the same kind of application looking into the omission of things. The forensic analysis starts to play into, that starts to be able to counter what the oppressor is doing, the criminal is doing, what PG&E is trying to get off. The last statement that PG&E did to the state legislature, hauled into the state legislature, you're not going to believe me until we start doing better. Well, he's a felon, folks. I mean, his company's a felon. He's the head of a felony company. And he's already the company, through their attorneys, have said they don't want to invest $75 billion that they stole from the people because they haven't done the investment in any way with the money they got. And everyone looks right past this crime going on. That's us, folks. That's where we have to step in because nobody else has. In fact, that's another, these concepts are constant. They're constant and universal. The principles of failure. I just stated that to the Supreme Court. And I said, no official having the duty and obligation. See, folks, you got to tie the duty and obligation. The duty and obligation stopped the crime, the ongoing crime. I said it a different way. I'm not going to tell you what we wrote, but not quite yet. The point is that these principles of failure are universal in this country right now. To me, I don't know what the problem is anymore, except I know it's not one letter going to go somewhere. It's going to have a lot of letters with a lot of persistence and intention behind them. Not with emotion, not with fantastical opinions. No, right on the point, right on the ground, right on the obligation and duty that's found. I'm a poet and don't know it, folks. Former Merck scientists sue Merck, alleging MMR vaccine efficacy fraud. If you're not the insider, become the insider. A lot of these things don't happen. So we're going to move a little bit from you looking from external reports and being able to start to extract things that are going on that I can show you. Absolutely start tying into the global governance condition, even in these United States of America. And it's because of that whole system that's just put a veneer of control governance over you that you didn't stop. And I can penetrate through myself, my mind, the rationale, the law allows me, not me, but the rationale go through the law, no different than you found out that the man can't have his livelihood affected in Tim's. Even if he's got a penalty, it can't go to the livelihood. I can bore right down in there. I already knew that. That was confirmation. You can too. We bore right to that. We cut through a lot of this nonsense. We cut through the layer they built on us that looks like an obstruction. It looks like the real foundation. No different than the false front spaghetti western I tell you we live in. When you walk into those buildings, they have a false floor. And so you have to understand that's the case, and then you say, well, I'm not going to believe that false floor is a fraud. And this is where we ought to have been, and you didn't have a right to make that false floor. And so you have to have enough awareness to be able to do this. Because you have to have another reality of the way it was supposed to be. In other words, the savings clauses I talked to you about are the base organic reality that the veneer was supposed to regard. And they don't. And that's where you catch them. You find the obligation and duty that's objectively printed, not because you made it up, because they didn't answer you. No, you'll go find it where they were written down before they got there and said, you had to do this, and they failed. That's how the court can find it was a felony. That's what I tell you, even this land stuff, that's how you catch them in doing extortion or coercion. Not because you feel that you're coerced, or not because you feel you were extorted against, it's because there's 3 or 4 elements that happened that caused that to be the case. Now, less esoteric, maybe if your mind didn't go through together to show what that was under extortion, remember that's the property violation. Coercion is the violation against the rights, or to the property, or independently. 2 different functions, property and rights. Extortion on property, coercion on rights. In property, if someone under color of official authority, without warrant, interferes with a property that they didn't have a right to touch underneath that color of authority, that's a felony. If they omit to do something that causes an interference and interjection, that's a felony. If they hand into that color without warrant the rights of the property to a third party, that's a felony. If they omit to do something that allows a third party to gain interest in the property without right, that's a felony. Move over to coercion. Identical, but to the rights of pertinent property or on their own. I hope I'm saying this slow enough for you guys. Once you do that, you got them. Once you get the elements of what I said, that they're officials in a capacity, they had no right, no warrant. It's the quo warranto comes up, doesn't it? Right there. And so then you identify if you didn't have a clue, you have an obligation to tell me and a duty. And if you failed to answer, now we have them where I can show you have no right to trespass my property, and you are in official capacity that this law says you couldn't trespass right here, and you're doing it. Why I'm writing this letter. Now your failure to answer becomes actionable, doesn't it? If not, admission and confession. Correct? See how a little bit different there? Because I know I try to tie the front of this broadcast to now. So we have to have someone inside, and then there's mechanisms to work. And the mechanisms ought to work a certain way. When we, if you will, forensically analyze these things, we take ourselves out of the emotion. We take ourselves, either do the investigative reporter mode, or we're doing this forensic analysis of this condition. We now move on to, let's say, now we're moving into a little more to the former Merck scientist that alleging MMR vaccine efficacy fraud. I'm not really into the vaccine here. I'm into what happened, a dynamic. Stephen A. Crawling and Joan A. Wachowski, former Merck virologist, blew the whistle by filing a qui tam action lawsuit, U.S. versus Merck and Company, in August 2010. The scientists alleged that the efficacy tests for measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, MMR, were faked. The document was unsealed in June of 2012. This is a major federal case alleging fraud in vaccine testing. It encapsulates how medical research can be manipulated to achieve desired results and why it may be wise to question the integrity and the validity of science-based medicine. I'll end there. Excellent point. Excellent position here. But you have to go back to the qui tam. I wanted to know when I saw that, did the United States enter in to defend this as a qui tam? Do you know what a qui tam is? It's the whistleblower style statutes. It's the old writ. It's like an old, it's an old action, a common law action. It has some things that have to go on there. One of the things is when you make the claim under qui tam for the federal government, you have to wait 60 days and see whether or not the United States government will take the case and defend it, prosecute it for you. As soon as I saw qui tam and vaccines, and my comprehensive knowledge knows that this is being set up by the government itself, and I'm not looking at the vaccines except for the subject matter, I had a big question right there. Because the question kind of turns on a prediction. Because I think we know what's going on, and yet no one wants to go at it properly. And I looked at this, I said, well, here's another way to get at this. And they kind of touched it right there in that next paragraph. Is this able to question the integrity and the validity of science-based medicine? It's worse than that. It's actually, I say, it's better for you if you engage this. It's worse for them than that. Because the question, when I saw qui tam, and I know the government is instrumental, Title 50 tells me it's instrumental, and the vaccine court tells me it's instrumental, and the agency's inaction to the harm in causing the vaccine court, Congress causing the vaccine court to be existent and not testing the safety, and a qui tam action where the government has to step up and defend against its own actions, was a logic rationale that said and predicts they could not, and they would not. A backwards proof proving that they're doing you harm, folks, and then you find out how, is that question. And so here's my Twitter right after I read the first part of that. And I think this might have came through Gary L. Through the Twitter. Again, I just see this stuff, little things pick up cues in my mind. Yeah, we can go down the vaccine thing. For those of you that are vaccines, this is a monster deal right here. I talked to you about that before, these things before. You have to be willing to step into it. You want to start testing for safety, I think this is the avenue. And here's what I think. This happens in a spark of an inspiration. When I see the failures, I can predict the failure, and then it moves into the next cause. Qui tam raised a red flag as I'm talking on Twitter. Back to, I guess it is Gary L. Would government intervene and expose FDA failing to independently test and the government's co-conspiracy to purchase vaccines it already knows has not been tested? I asked that, would the government intervene to expose FDA failings to independently test and government purchase co-conspiracy? Why? Because qui tam requires a 60-day cooling off period for the government to figure out if it's going to prosecute your case. If it doesn't after 60 days, you prosecute it on your own. This is where you are one of those private attorney generals, right here, if you want to know what those are. You're doing it as a whistleblower. Well, the prediction I would have based on the problem of this conflict of interest the government has with this industry would be that it would not engage. It would not take on and prosecute the case. It would have to have its attorneys go after itself. So I put in the Twitter, survey says, go read through the article, and it finally tells you. Like I said, about 2/3 of the way through or 3/4, you finally find the answer. Survey says, federal gov declined to intervene in the whistleblower suit. I say, in response to that, perfect. An avenue to mandate independent safety tests to enjoin fraud, waste, and abuse. Why do I say it like that, folks? Because there's a whole condition behind the government has laws about stopping fraud, waste, and abuse. You can plug in this condition to each one of those words, and you could, to stop each one would require, you could insist, if the court would, you could, again, you still have to set the case up. You could mandate in equity now, again, equity, not suing common law because I got harms and I got these itches and I got these bumps. No, you sue the government in equity. They owe an obligation to make sure that even to themselves, especially a taxpayer can do this one. You want to call yourself a taxpayer? Here, this one's for you too, not just vaccines. Because there's fraud, waste, and abuse. They're taking money from the coffers and buying these vaccines that people from the inside have shown you are improper. The government of which didn't want to prosecute. You'd think that they'd want to, don't you, folks? But see, there's a condition, and so you can predict that they wouldn't. Why? Because they'd have to uncover their own crime. That's fraud, waste, and abuse. There's a whole sections of law about Congress wanting to curb that. Now you want to become a private attorney general? You want to start getting more correction on vaccines? I looked at this story and that's what came to my mind. In the first 2 paragraphs, folks. Did it come to you? I hope it did for somebody, even if you weren't interested in this. I mean, we can go. I kind of go through, click, 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 click. We got the answer there. See how fast this is, folks. Does it mean you win? No, nothing means you win. But are you one of the people that are right on the point and really hard pressed? They're going to be hard pressed to throw you away. How can they say it's frivolous when you're talking about governmental fraud, waste, and abuse? Again, you're speaking the language of something that they said that they want to avoid. Congress, if you will. That whistleblower talking, you're coming as a third person to do this as well, folks. If you don't get the power of how this stuff works. And so, forensically, inside, you can go tear through this stuff. Well, and witness to it, you can actually see failures. And I can pick up avenues of remedy, I guess is the point. I guess I go back to the story. Well, we get all wrapped up in the former vaccine scientists sue Merck alleging MMR vaccine efficacy fraud. We're going to catch him, right? No, it's not going to catch him necessarily. And what happens on a Quietam? They just get penalized. They can continue after that unless you do it more correctly. That would be the mandate, wouldn't it? An equity remedy built in to this. The Quietam came as a whistleblower. That whistleblower was made public. You now are affected by this. Well, as a taxpayer, your funds are now being abused, wasted, fraudulently. And you piggyback this condition, not as a Quietam, well, unless you do it as a taxpayer, maybe I guess you could go that way, but over in the fraud statutes. And again, I'm just trying to exercise this for you. I don't read these stories anymore necessarily, because it's going to inform me on something. Because now we got someone from the inside going to do it for me. No, this is not going to be done this way. What it's going to do is give me, if I was interested to do this and I was focused on it, those of you, there's tons of people in the vaccine thing. I guess that's why I have other more important things. I'm wired to do something else much more effectively than go after the vaccines. What I can tell you is the mechanisms that are there to available are applicable on every wrong like that. And so I can apply exactly what I'm doing to this. And so my mind works. I just look at words and I'm saying, what does that do in reality? I don't make it up. Quietam is a particular thing, has a certain requirement. And I say, well, here's a theory. If the government has a conflict of interest, then the conflict of interest would say that there would be no attorney from the United States government that would step up to defend this because they would have to expose their own conflict of interest in the fraud. That's a pretty clear rationale, isn't it? And so let's go read to the story to see if that theory is confirmed. Sure enough, the United States did not enter in. So now these people have to take it on themselves to do the fraud. And here's why you hear the United States versus Merck and Company. When you do that, you're doing that in the name of the United States government after the 60-day period. And just go read about Quietam. Don't make it up. Go into the statutes. You'll find that a Quietam action can be done. They'll tell you how to do it. You don't need, again, there's all in the black and white, folks. Now you could poo-poo all that. You could say it's no good, and then you can go get your little ones inoculated underneath the same fraud that's being exposed, and the waste and the abuse that's going on by it, and the other frauds that are continuing. You can continue to watch the crime and just be an accessory to it. I'm asking us to stop. I don't know what else to say. I can go through all the figures. You can read it. Get on the Blogcaster. I get tired of even thinking about reading. I just need to set the thing up. I want to know if I can inspire you. If it is an inspiration, it doesn't take much to identify some material critical positions to take in just 2 paragraphs of this story, that I'm applying things that you don't know if you haven't read it, that you have to know if you're going to apply it, that are not spoken to, conditions, precedent, that are going to have to go on, that if you can put 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 together, you're going to get all kinds of numbers. But if you put the elements together of what was supposed to happen versus, and in this case, it predictively wouldn't if there's a conflict of interest, and then it didn't, you have your conflict of interest. You now have a failure of fiduciary. That's another type of breach, but you seriously have to think about it because it came from a whistleblower saying there's fraud. Now I go down to the simple, these are Inspector General statements. These are what the Inspector General will look, they look to stop fraud, waste, and abuse, right? Again, I'm not making any of this up. I'm just applying what they've already agreed that they'd be susceptible to. And I'm doing it as a third party to a quitam. And I'm doing it based on the fact that the government didn't want to step up. Folks, do you think the government should step up and protect this from you, protect you from this? I hope you said yes. The anomaly, the silence is that they didn't. They chose not to. Again, the quitam, you've got to go look on how this works. It's not that hard to understand. It's a remedy that's been provided by Congress. It's to do exactly what, these remedies are to do exactly what they say. They either stop organized crime or, in this case, stop fraud, waste, and abuse. All I do is state that. And you can too. It's not that hard. It's not a big deal. Yeah, it's a hassle to go through the darn thing. Why would we have to do it at all? Why isn't it stopped? Why didn't the government step up and do that? Bad don't fix itself, folks. I just liked that statement when I came up with it for Twitter. There's all kinds of little statements I don't say, but there's just some truths that go on, and they're going to continue. The truths that are really just indicative that I come up with are just indicative of the environment we live in, and we allow it to continue because we believe someone's going to fix it for us. Internal documents again here. This is like, how do you find this out unless you start doing lawsuits or a whistleblower, or you figure out ways to get at these guys? Internal documents show 3M hid PFAS dangers for decades. Not much different than Monsanto, the same story. This is the chemical contaminant PFAS is emerging as a big problem in Michigan. And everywhere, folks. It doesn't stop. The 3M environmental specialist, in a scathing resignation letter, accused company officials of being unethical and more concerned with markets, legal defensibility, and image over environmental safety. When it comes to PFAS and the emergence in contaminant causing a potential crisis. It's in there, but it's only a potential crisis throughout Michigan and the country. So you can see a bunch of limitation words in those stories. Another thing, folks, I told you the problem of water pollution, not environmentalism. The problem of water pollution is a big problem. It's not only global. You think it's out there. It's actually local to you, and that's your life. Water is life, and if you don't have that cleaned up, you don't know to clean it up is the other thing, or you don't have the right systems, and you think you know to clean it up because not every water purification is a very interesting problem. You really need to look close. There's a bunch of different dynamics that have to happen to water before you can actually begin to come close to making it clean. It's not just steaming it. It's not even just freezing it. There's just an interesting problem with it. So we start polluting that water, we're getting to the point where we're not going to run away from these things that are seriously harmful to us. And the government was there to allow these companies to pollute a little bit. The inside of the employees of which, some of them are getting a conscience. So the internal documents show, and they had to get this through some lawsuit, I suppose. At any rate, the point is, it doesn't matter about where the documents is. It's now made public. You're either going to sit back and agree that this continues, or a couple of you agree to come together to figure out a pathway to put more pressure on this. I don't even know where to say more than that because of the type of problem it is. I don't know what you're all going to find. I do know that what they do is they'll get on a miner for polluting the water when he doesn't. He's just dealing in the nature that's already there, just moving it around. That's somehow become a big nasty pollutant. But the environment, you don't hear the environmentalists going after this one. And it came from internal people bringing up the information to you, making it public. And now you have you can get a handle on it if you want. You don't have to wait around. Twitter's new vaccine feature won't stop anti-vaxxers. And I guess I should add this out of order with the other point about the FDA. Twitter vaccine features won't stop new feature won't stop anti-vaxxers. Twitter announced Friday that it would be the latest social media platform to intervene in searches for information relating to vaccines. Now, if you search the keywords associated with vaccines, and prompt appears that directs you to the vaccine.gov, a resource from the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Twitter said it also won't auto-suggest search terms that are likely to direct individuals to non-credible commentary and information about vaccines. I can't really speak to the Twitter things. I don't want to get into whether or not they have the right to do all this. There's a line of reasoning that would say that they don't, given that they're using the public ways. I'm not here for that. What I want to point out here, and there's an argument to be made if it is just an argument, and maybe even if Jack has the Twitter guy, Jack, CEO for Twitter, CEO Jack, if he's got any moral compass at all, he can be poked and prodded. I almost did it, but I didn't have enough time to really think through. I don't want to make an unnecessary insult either. Does he understand that that the information that people want, that they will not be promoting, are the things that are the harms that are found in the very documents that are not on the vaccine.gov, that are in the private documentation? That how is he making that distinction? How is he highlighting the fact that some people are genetically predisposed to be harmed? And when he doesn't allow for someone to find that information, that he is indirectly causing. In that regard, if he couldn't find the information and that was the last time they were going to look, and he blocks that information, and then a little one is genetically predisposed, is harmed, what's his culpability here? What's he doing to people? And I'm not just jumping on Jack, 'cause I don't know Jack. I don't know Twitter. I just use it a little bit. I don't like a lot of this stuff, but we've got to look at the other side of the fact, the lack of proper knowledge. How does he know what non-credible commentary is?
Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.